It seems like every year an indie release comes kind of out of nowhere, and for better or worse, it completely surprises me. Well, today's surprise is Dungeons of Hinterberg, which comes to us from developer Microbird Games, their debut title by the way, and publisher Curve Games. But is Dungeons of Hinterberg a hidden treasure worth discovering, or does it end up lost and frozen in the Alps? Well, let's find out in our full review. Real quick, discover your next indie gaming community by liking and subscribing to the video, heading over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames where you can support independent content just like this, or heading out to our live streams every Tuesday and Thursday. They're right here or on twitch.tv/idreamofindiegames. Your new indie gaming community is waiting for you. Dungeons of Hinterberg feels a bit like a more focused Breath of the Wild fused with social elements that wouldn't feel out of place in a Persona game. That sounds crazy, and it's a risky proposition for Microbird Games, and yet they pull it off with confidence and swagger. Our story revolves around Louisa, a young lady just starting out in the world, having chosen law as her career field. Louisa realizes she might have made the wrong choice, as she's already feeling the monotony of the daily grind, and so she seeks a bit more excitement out of life. This leads her to seek out an epic slaycation in Hinterberg. Hidden within the Alps and even thought of as a myth by some, Hinterberg hosts 25 dungeons full of magic, monsters, and treasure. Louisa grabs a hotel for a few weeks and gets ready to test her mettle against these dungeons, armed with a sword and a stamp book, which acts as proof of her accomplishments. The plot feels instantly relatable, as we've all had life beat us down at some point, right? Who hasn't worked a 40, 50-hour week, gone through the motions, and wondered, what's it all for sometimes? Dungeons of Hinterberg reminds us that it's okay to feel this way sometimes, and also nice to take time for ourselves and escape our comfort zones. The writing is charming here, with Hinterberg full of endearing characters. It's a place that feels lived in, with the inner city and its 4 biomes all having a distinct identity of their own. The game is split between 3 main gameplay elements. Part 1, going around the town of Hinterberg while forming relationships with townsfolk, purchasing items, and building up your stats. Part 2, walking about biomes, discovering secrets, gathering your magic abilities, and finding dungeon locations. And Part 3, yes, the most important of all, exploring and conquering the dungeons themselves. Let's first discuss those 25 dungeons. Within each of these labyrinths, Louisa will be tasked with solving various puzzles and taking down monsters via the game's excellent combat system. Puzzles will often rely on magical abilities, which are again specific to the selected biome. The puzzles are really clever, but not overly difficult, perfect for those aha moments. Someone like me, not great at puzzles, love them. In one example, you may have to sweep Louisa up with your magical tornado in order to reach an otherwise unreachable cliff. Or you might be dropping a massive bomb onto a switch and setting it off at the right moment. The ways in which you utilize magic to find solutions is dazzling. And because each dungeon has such a distinct feel and set of solutions, the magic never really runs dry throughout this 20 to 30 hour campaign. The combat does take a bit of a backseat to the puzzle solving, but is almost nearly as enjoyable. It's simple really when you start out, with Louisa relying on 2 different sword slashes much of the time, but where things get more interesting is when you begin mixing in your magic abilities. You might toss a tornado at your foes, or drop a bomb on them, or even ride around taunting them on your amazing hoverboard. Most encounters will take place in an arena-like setting where you can target enemies, though doing so isn't really all that necessary. Louisa will learn additional attacks as you advance in the game as well, such as a frenzied spin attack and an explosive lunge. Enemies put up a pretty fair fight on the default settings, but will never feel overwhelmingly difficult or come anywhere close to a Souls-like experience. Louisa is also equipped with potions attached to the left trigger, which makes healing a breeze, but I do have to say it might take a little bit of an adjustment for players to get used to not having a jump button. Going to the edges of cliffs will have Louisa auto-jump. It's definitely a little weird, but it kind of makes sense if you get into the puzzles and kind of see what they're all about. But yeah, as far as new weapons go, all the menu design is just really exquisite. It's very easy to tell what's more powerful. There's even some auto-equip features here when you buy something from a shop. The whole thing just feels very streamlined and accessible. Indeed, while there are difficulty options, Dungeons of Hinterberg feels fair and balanced. It's worth noting that while typically your gameplay can be saved at any time, in the dungeons you're going to have to find save points that are a little ways in, so you won't always be able to save at free will. Thankfully, death isn't a huge deal in the game and won't set you back all that far. So that's basically how the dungeons play out, but what happens outside of them across those 4 unique biomes? Well, they mainly serve as hubs for discovering the next dungeon location, but there are people to talk to and rest points that can earn you various attribute points. The biomes aren't massive, but they feel large enough and are visually breathtaking. I loved walking about them and just getting lost in the majesty of it all. And now for the city life and social aspects of the game. Some of you might be saying, I don't want that crap in my little dungeon ARPG adventure. Well, fear not, as this portion of the game doesn't feel self-absorbed or really act as a dominant aspect to the game as a whole. In-town conversations rarely wear out their welcome, and in fact, you could make an argument for wanting even more of them. There are plenty of personalities to form bonds with. You may stop off at the Krampus bar, my personal favorite for obvious reasons if you're a fan of this channel, and you'll chat it up with a friend there. You might take part in an event happening in the streets, or even take some time for yourself and go out on a boat or hit the spa. At the end of the day, you can retreat to your hotel room and go to sleep, or cheat a bit and watch some TV at the cost of being a bit tired the next day. Yeah, it's gonna cost you some HP, basically. Whoever you hang with in the city, you'll typically be building a bond between them which is tracked in-game, and you'll even unlock modes such as a photo mode. The more you converse with people, the more confidence you gain, and the more opportunities come your way. Relationships can even help you in dungeons, as players might gain sword enhancements, additional HP, or even new attacks. I was surprised how much I enjoyed the social aspect of the game and how well it blended in with the other gameplay elements. Of course, the city isn't just for fun and games, as you can also purchase weapon upgrades and potions, with the game's built-in map doing an excellent job of detailing everything and even allowing for waypoints. Now this is how you make a map in an indie game. Fast travel also eventually opens up, making getting around the world of Dungeons of Hinterberg a snap. The real beauty of this title, though, is that you don't have to subscribe to any particular formula. Feel like relaxing and gaining some attributes for the day? You can go for it. Finally strong enough to crush a tougher dungeon? Do it. They're all labeled and it will let you know if you're ready or not. The day is yours to own. Dungeons can be completed in pretty much any order except towards the beginning of the game, and this creates a gaming experience that feels focused yet free. You know your main goal, but how you go about achieving it and when you go about achieving it is up to you. Visually, Dungeons of Hinterberg certainly borrows a bit from the Breath of the Wild playbook, but it's strikingly beautiful. The city feels vibrant and alive, the sprawling open areas are gorgeous, and the animations are top-notch. From snowy landscapes to swamps, Dungeons of Hinterberg has a strikingly gorgeous art style backed by excellent PC performance. I can assure you Breath of the Wild never ran this good. On my 4070, I rarely came across any frame drops during my time with the game. The engine seems to be very well optimized for PCs, with the only real drawback being some texture pop-in, which was a bit distracting at times. It's also kind of odd that you can just run directly through many of the non-important characters around town, but at the same time, at least you don't become tangled up in a bunch of NPCs, so there's that. Even still, the menus, maps, creatures, everything about the game is pretty. Maybe you could have used a little bit more enemy variety here or there, but overall I'm not complaining. And I did test the Steam Deck version for a bit, which comes with a performance setting of its own. And yeah, you're gonna take a visual hit unquestionably, but I'll be damned if it didn't target 60 FPS and hit it more often than not. I even tested the game in some of the busier areas. As you would expect, you do lose that beauty on a handheld, but playing this way was more than serviceable, and it's a great option for Steam Deck owners. As for the soundtrack, it could best be described as powerful and emotional. During battles, players are treated to uplifting orchestral pieces with mellow thudding bass lines driving the beat forward. These compositions add a very unique energy to the game that fit the theme well, and they're very well implemented overall. Sound effects are of an equally high quality, making Dungeons of Hinterberg a lovely visual and audio treat. Well, let's go back to the beginning of this review now. Remember, I said there's a surprise release every year, at least one? Well, I'm happy to say it's a good surprise in this case. And by the way, thanks for making it this far. Dungeons of Hinterberg is an astonishingly well-made product from Microbird Games that has me frothing at the mouth wondering just what they're going to make next. The combat is pretty much always entertaining with its mix of magic, dungeons are clever and a blast to go through, and I even like the social aspect of the game. Do yourself a favor and grab one of 2024's best and most surprising releases. I'm gonna go ahead and award Dungeons of Hinterberg the elusive Golden Genie Lamp of approval.